Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of the Victim podcast. We discuss a lot of sad and potentially triggering things on this show. We try to be as sensitive and cautious as possible, but if you are sensitive to things involving abuse and may be triggered, please think twice before listening to our show.
Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Rosie.
How are you doing tonight, Rosie?
I'm doing well. I'm a little sleepy. How are you?
I'm good. Very much material to cover tonight. We're talking about Love Has Won. It's a very mind-blowing group of people that was led by one person. We'll dive deeper into it later, but before we start tonight, I want to let you know that I was a guest on another really interesting podcast called Coloring Outside the Mind. One of my good friends, Joe, makes it. We talked about a really fascinating thing having to do with modern day pirates and Britney Spears music. So please go check that out. Show some support to our friends Joe and Heather over there. And I'll remind you again at the end of the episode so you don't have to leave this one right now to check it out. Anyway. Do you have anything else to say, Rosie, before we jump into it? I know that you're very interested in this topic.
Yeah, because I watched the Dr. Phil episode on it.
Yeah.
Which always piques my interest.
And we listened to another podcast talk about it when the story first came to light.
Right.
While we were driving through Colorado. So that was really weird. We were only a couple hours away from where this all happened. So, are you ready to do this? This episode of Voice of the Victim podcast is supported by Best Fiends. And you've heard us talk about Best Fiends. It's the colorful and fun puzzle game with literally thousands of levels and tons of cute collectible characters. If you're tired of the same old puzzle games, Best Fiends is the game for you because they have something new every day, including events, challenges, and new levels to keep you entertained. It also helps to keep your mind active with challenging but fun and casual puzzles. I appreciate that while I'm editing the podcast, while I'm waiting for something to export, or one of those things where you're just waiting for your computer to work. I can play Best Fiends, and it keeps my mind awake while I'm waiting. So, Rosie, what's going on in your little world of Best Fiends?
Ryan, I love this game. I play it all the time.
I know.
And I just hit level 500, folks. It's true. I'm not lying. I'm actually on 520 because that's how much I play Best Fiends.
You just crossed 500.
I know.
Too.
I know. I think this is a great game, and I'm usually not a gamer of any type. What I'm doing right now is this little Flowers for Mom challenge. It's super cute. There's a baby bug bopping around with a bouquet of flowers, and I have to finish these challenges, and then I get this little brittle bloom bug in for my collection. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm almost there.
Obviously, we're big fans of Best Fiends. It's also really cool that you don't need to be connected to the internet to progress through the game. Just this morning, our internet wasn't working on my phone, and I was like, hey, Rosie, is your internet not working? And she's like, I don't know.
I don't know, because I'm playing Best Fiends.
That actually happened.
It did.
So, join us and millions of other people who are already playing this fun puzzle game. Download Best Fiends for free on the Apple App Store or Google Play today. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. So tonight's story unfolds in Moffett, Colorado. We actually, like I said, learned about this as we were driving through the mountains from Boulder to Granby, which is a bit north up the Rockies from where this story starts. Well, Rosie, when we were in Idaho Springs, where we stopped for lunch, we were about 3 hours... a 3-hour drive from Moffett, which really isn't that far in Colorado because
No,
everything's like an hour drive. So it's a tiny town right in the middle of the Rockies with about 114 residents. To the east, there's a mountain range capped off by Blanca Peak, and to the west, the Rio Grande National Forest, also spotted with mountains. So It's kind of in a valley plain in the middle of the Rockies. It's got an elevation of 7,566 feet, so about 2,000 feet higher than Denver, and this will come into play later. So anyway, this whole thing came to light on April 28th of 2021, just about a month ago as of the release of this episode. So what happened that day, Rosie?
Well, late that Wednesday evening, the Saguache County Sheriff's Office received a call from Moffat. Officer Stephen Hansen was asked to respond to a call at a mobile home at the end of a cul-de-sac. He had a slight idea of what to expect, but wasn't fully prepared for the disturbing and strange discovery he was about to make. Inside the home, there were 7 adults, a 13-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old boy. The call had actually come from the father of the 2-year-old boy, saying that the people in this mobile home had been holding his son hostage. But in one of the bedrooms, Officer Hansen found something very disturbing.
Yeah, he came across a body in a sleeping bag, but the condition of the body that it was found in was really disturbing, so brace yourselves.
The body was from a woman and appeared to already be mummified and adorned like a type of shrine. She was covered in Christmas lights and had a very distinctive glitter makeup around her eyes.
And this next part, it's really gross, but her eyes were missing. Now, it's said that the body was already badly decomposed upon discovery. They guessed it was about 2 months or so that had been dead. But it actually appeared that the eyes were removed intentionally.
Ugh. They had an idea of who this was, but because of the state of the body, they couldn't even lift fingerprints and had to bring in dental records to confirm the identity.
And it turned out that this was the body of a 45-year-old woman named Amy Carlson, who was actually a very significant person in this area.
Amy Carlson was the leader of a religious group made up somewhere between 12 and 20 members, known by several names like the Galactic Federation of Light, the Church Ministry of Mother of All Creation, 5D Full Disclosure, and their most common name, Love Has Won.
I feel like there's like 100 cults called the Galactic Federation of Light. But that's
do?
just me. It just seems like such a mainstream name.
Wow, I didn't feel that way at all.
Oh, really? I don't know. It just feels like I've heard that before.
From like Star Trek, maybe?
Maybe.
This group had been located at times in California and Hawaii, but it was headquartered in Crestone, Colorado, right at the foot of the mountain range, about 20 minutes east of Moffat, where Amy was found.
Now, they were headquartered in a mobile home, so I'm guessing even though they were officially from Crestone, I guess they had driven the mobile home over to Moffat.
Okay.
And I really hope we're pronouncing that right.
Now, as the leader, she was known as Mother God. The members of this group believed that she was the creator of the universe.
Now, based on this, a lot of people would consider this a cult. I mean, you can decide for yourself. But Amy's mother, Linda Haythorne, definitely considers it a cult. And she actually appeared on Dr. Phil with her other daughter in September of 2020 to try to help others see her daughter for who she was. But before we get to that, let's try to unwrap this group a little bit more.
Love Has Won was founded by Amy in 2006. One day, she decided that she was going to leave her third husband and her 3 children to start this group with a core ideology centered around love.
Dr. Phil questioned her about how she could justify abandoning her 3 children, ages 12, 7, and 2, to call herself the embodiment of love. But she said that it was a higher calling and that angels had spoken to her, saying that if she didn't do it, no one else would. But according to Linda, Amy's mother, Amy had really never been close with her children or acted maternal in any way.
So, Amy left her family and her job at McDonald's to form this group.
Yeah, and Amy said she had given the birth certificates to each of the fathers of the kids. I think each kid was from a different man, and said basically, thanks for taking care of my kids. I'm out of here.
Wow. That's terrible. So, like, really cutting the cord. Like, done.
Yeah. I mean, a 2-year-old?
Now, even with all this going on, her followers believed that she was the creator of the universe, that she was able to cure people, and that she regularly performed spiritual surgeries to heal people's hearts and brains. After her death, 2 members of this group, Ryan Kramer and Karen Raymond, were asked, if Amy was Mother God, why didn't she heal herself? Ryan's answer was, I actually do not have an answer for that. Sincerely, I don't know. Then followed that up with, God is a woman.
Yeah, but other members don't view Amy's passing as a death at all.
Rather than a death, members of the group view this as her ascension, saying that she's just, quote, in status.
No, stasis.
Oh, in stasis and out of communication. Huh.
Basically in a state of no activity.
Okay, like in a cocoon.
Yeah, pretty much.
When they were further questioned about Amy's death, they just said, quote, what are your intentions, love?
It's interesting they call everybody love, even if they're mad at them, obviously. But this is a little Heaven's Gatey, which is a big deal because in that case, many people were coerced into taking their own lives by a person in power. Also kind of Jonestown-y. You know, this kind of control over a group of people by one person is really dangerous. But in that situation, this person had convinced them that they were in communication with a higher power and basically a divine being, and they had to listen to everything they said, you know. And we see that in this group as well. Even now, after Amy's dead, there are currently many members who are still devout believers in her. And speaking of which, we mentioned there were 7 adults found in the mobile home where her body was kept. So what happened with them?
Those 7 members were arrested and charged with 1 count of abuse of a corpse and 2 counts of child abuse. Ryan and Karen, who we mentioned earlier, were among them, but they were released on personal
reconnaissance.
Oh my gosh. Recognizance.
Bonds.
Bonds. I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
And that's how they were able to be questioned by the media. Now, as of now, other members, mainly Hope and Aurora, are still live streaming regularly on their YouTube channel, as was the custom for a long time, seemingly unfazed by the passing of their leader.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Hope and Aurora later because they're very active on YouTube, but it's obviously odd that a person who claimed to be able to heal and cure people would die at such a young age without any prediction or notice ahead of time. And it's also odd that the members of the cult would keep her body for so long, apparently tamper with it rather than report it.
Yeah, especially the eyeball thing. That's really weird. Amy and her followers viewed the human body as simply a vessel for this 3D world. And their ultimate goal was to move on to the 5D world.
Yeah, they call the normal world 3D and say that the people in the 3D world are trying to keep us all in boxes and keep us from reaching our full potential. And their goal is to be in the 5D world, which I don't know if that means being in this group or if it means passing on to the next realm. And now Amy's in the 5D world. I couldn't tell you. But that's one reason it's odd that they kept her body for so long, is that they view the body as just an unimportant vessel. So why keep it and dress it as a shrine? That's just really hard to explain. And as we'll get into later, there's just so many contradictions within the belief system of this group that don't line up, don't make any sense, but we'll get to that later. Let's go back now to her cause of death and talk about why she probably died. Now, the investigation's ongoing, so there are no concrete answers. That'll come out later, I'm hoping, but based on what a former member said, multiple former members said, we have an idea of how she died so young.
Now, a man named Andrew Profasi had joined the group after he survived a car accident that his best friend was killed in. He decided he needed a spiritual reset and found love has won.
Now, we'll talk about this later, but Andrew is in a very delicate state here. He just experienced a really heartbreaking tragedy. He's vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And, he watched his best friend die next to him, and he survived. So, that's a very complicated emotion, I would imagine.
He went on to fly to Denver, Colorado, and take a 5.5-hour taxi ride straight from Denver. That must have been expensive.
Ugh.
Down to the Moffat area where the group was headquartered.
Oh, how do you even find a taxi driver willing to make that trip?
Maybe they meant Uber.
Still, how do you find a driver willing to make that trip? That's because then they got to drive back.
Yeah.
But Andrew says as soon as he walked in the front door of the mobile home where they were headquartered, he knew he'd made a grave miscalculation.
Oh. He says that everyone was in the middle of a mushroom trip when he arrived. But despite this, he was in the middle of nowhere with no transportation of his own, so he stayed. He says that during the day, Amy was one of the most brilliant people he'd ever met. While he was there, she declared that Andrew was actually Father God.
I almost wonder if she sensed doubt in him and in order to get him to stay, gave him this rank.
Don't you think maybe she just thought he was cute?
Yes, that's also possible.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing Father God and Mother God,
Get it on?
Yeah. But Andrew says that she had a dark side that would come out later in the day. According to him, she was able to drink more alcohol than anyone he'd ever seen.
Andrew says she would fill a highball glass almost to the top with vodka, then spritz the top with water. He said she drank 8 to 9 of those a day.
I can't even imagine that.
What was the point of the water spritz?
To say it's a cocktail. But that's a typical glass, anywhere from 8 to 12 ounces. You can actually see this glass in many of her videos. It's basically like a scotch glass. I don't know what's normal, but when I pour a scotch into a highball glass, I maybe do 1 to 3 fingers high, depending on the day. But to fill it to the top and then do that 8 to 9 times.
How would she not pass out?
Yeah,
that's insane.
Well, maybe she did eventually pass out and that's how she fell asleep. But I don't think I could survive one night of that.
No.
And yet, according to Andrew, this was just her typical evening.
Another ex-member said that Amy would drink beer all day long.
So obviously, this is very taxing on her body and her liver. Who knows what caused her death, but the liver failure alone probably could have done it. But it wasn't just booze that she was ingesting.
Amy is also seen on video drinking something that she promoted last year as a cure for COVID. It's called colloidal silver. Is that how you say that?
Colloidal, yeah.
Colloidal.
Zook senses the trouble here. He's trying to warn us. But I got some info on colloidal silver from the U.S. Department of Health website, and we'll share some of that with you. So, Rosie, according to the National Institute of Health within the U.S. Department of Health, what is colloidal silver?
Colloidal silver consists of tiny silver particles in a liquid that is sometimes promoted on the internet as a dietary supplement. However, evidence supporting health-related claims is lacking. In fact, colloidal silver can be dangerous to your health.
So, the next question the website answers is colloidal silver safe?
Colloidal silver can cause serious side effects. The most common is Argyria.
Oh, I should have looked this up. Argyria, I would imagine.
It's a bluish-gray discoloration of the skin, which is usually permanent.
Oh, scary.
Colloidal silver can also cause poor absorption of some drugs, such as certain antibiotics and thyroxine.
Yeah, that's not really important. It's just, it has negative effects on both your health and the way you're able to absorb nutrients.
The FDA also warned in 1999 that colloidal silver isn't safe or effective for treating any disease or condition.
So that pretty much sums it up there, that based on scientific research, there's nothing that this does for you. But now let's go to what is Argyria. Is that how we decided to pronounce it?
Yes.
We probably sound like idiots, but what is it, Rosie?
Well, silver can build up in the body's tissue, causing a bluish-gray discoloration of large areas of skin, especially those exposed to the sun. People have developed this from using homemade and commercial colloidal silver products.
So basically, it's not effective. It causes all these issues. It's pretty much something that it's just a snake oil thing, and it causes more harm than good. It really sounds like the benefits do not outweigh the risk.
Right.
And I mean, you can see the effects of this when you look at videos of Amy. She did have a very pale bluish skin near the end of her life, whereas in videos in the past, she had like an olivey tan complexion. So it's scary. But I don't think anyone could have survived this combination between the severe alcohol abuse and drinking silver.
Yeah, that does seem like a rough time.
Yeah, but her alcoholism does make me wonder if she was truly delusional and believed she was really a mother god, or maybe she was fully aware that she was manipulating and abusing these people just for her personal gain, and she drank so much so she didn't care as much about the harm she was causing. That's just a personal theory if she wasn't truly delusional. But speaking of which, let's talk about a few instances in particular that were caught on video, irrefutably showing Amy's abusive behavior.
The most shocking video shows Amy in the living room of the mobile home with at least 5 other adults and a crying girl around 2 or 3 years old. Amy was trying to do a live stream, but the child wouldn't stop crying. First, she counts to 3, but it doesn't work.
Which is ironic, given the power that she says she has as Mother God.
After this, she gives the child over to one of the adult men, and they lock her in a dark closet.
Now, she justified this action to Dr. Phil as giving the child a chance to focus and center herself. But what? She's a small child. She's not meditating or centering herself. She's probably crying for a very specific reason that's not being taken care of and instead being ignored, and she's being locked in a closet. It's sickening.
This really shows just how unattentive she must have been as a mother.
Yeah, and narcissistic.
A 2 to 3 year old does not center itself, especially that's just not a thing.
But 2 minutes pass with this child in the closet, which it's a long time when you're in this situation. And they finally take her out of the closet.
The girl was still crying, so the man gave her back to Amy, who did the same thing again, counting to 3 while saying she had no problem putting the girl back in the closet if she didn't stop. But again, after counting to 3, the little girl was still whimpering. So Amy had her put back in the closet saying, "You're not listening." Then after the man says, "Nobody listens," Amy snapped back, They better effing listen."
Yeah, she flailed her arm in anger when she said that. They better effing listen. It was just, and she didn't say effing. Obviously we're censoring, but just the anger she displayed right in front of this kid in the middle of putting her in a closet and expecting her to understand what she's saying to her. You think a 2-year-old really would understand what she's trying to get her to do here? Well,
the count to 3, yeah. But if a kid's freaking out, they're not going to listen to the 3 thing.
And Amy's not her mother.
Yeah, why does Amy feel like she has the authority? I mean, she does
because
she's Mother God.
Well, we'll talk about it. Yeah, she's very narcissistic, and I'm not diagnosing her. Other experts have said that, and I'll talk about my theory of why she's this way after we talk about these couple examples of her abusive behavior. But anyway, while the child was in the closet, one of the men starts just eating chips like nothing's happening and goes on to serve some to Amy. And we'll talk about this more later too, but it seems like Amy was using her followers as personal servants almost. But this time, the 2 minutes comes and goes, and the girl continues to cry in the closet, and everyone just ignores the timer.
About 2 minutes into the second round of the closet time, another older adult woman, seemingly in her 60s, comes into the frame and embraces Amy, while Amy lets the young child suffer in the dark closet. Finally, after 3 minutes, they get the child out of the closet. The child is given to Amy, and she starts holding the little girl really tightly and speaking loudly directly in the girl's ear, saying, "No, this is ridiculous." It's so also scary that she feels so comfortable doing this while being taped.
Right?
Like, it's just very okay with it.
It just shows how much power her followers gave her, and how much she had manipulated them into believing that she was who she said she was.
Right.
And when Dr. Phil questioned the group about the treatment of this child, they justified it by saying, well, people used to beat their kids 50 years ago and it was totally fine. But Dr. Phil responded, no, just because some people did it back then doesn't mean it was ever okay to beat children. And that just doesn't justify doing it yourself. And after that, they didn't want to talk about it anymore. He tried going back to it and they were like, no, let's just move on. I definitely recommend watching the Dr. Phil, whatever you can find of the Dr. Phil episode on this. But that wasn't the only abusive behavior caught on video. Now this one, we know we have a lot of cat lovers out there, so prepare yourself for this.
Now, this other video shows Amy holding and petting a cat on the March 7th, 2018 live stream. But when the cat starts trying to get away, she grabs it by the neck, saying, hang on, don't be a bitch now. Then she stares at it in the eyes, saying, I'm talking to you, stupid. Then she starts spitting on the cat's forehead, calling it the R word. The R word? Oh, now I know what the R word is.
Yeah. You know, the word you don't say. I also want to mention Amy is obviously completely wasted during this live stream. And I want to warn you, this next part is very disturbing because it's some real direct physical abuse.
She goes on to yell in the cat's face about Robin Williams, who she claimed to be in communication with. Then she starts manhandling the cat, first grabbing it firmly by the arms while jostling it around. Then she grabs it by the scruff with one hand and holds it over her head for 20 full seconds as the cat cried out and winced in pain.
Which, Rosie, you know, this is rare. Cats rarely show pain, even if they're feeling it. It's hard to know if they're suffering. So the fact that this cat was wincing and crying, and she continued to do it, is just sickening and shows how little empathy she had.
Right. After this, she put the cat back in her lap, wrapped both of her hands around the cat's neck, and stared at it in the eyes, angrily yelling at it again about how she's Mother God and the cat knows it.
What? How would the cat know that? And just for extra description, she had her hands around the cat's neck like she was about to pop its head off.
Ooh.
Like, just...
Then she starts shaking the cat violently, quickly extending her arms up and out, then bringing the cat back down to her chest over and over again.
Yeah, just up and down, really fast, shaking it.
After that, she got right back in the cat's face and started spit blowing directly into the cat's eyes and face.
And this is all on a live stream from March of 2018. If you do want to see this for yourself, just to see how vicious and cruel she is, you can go check out the YouTube channel Rising Above. Love has one. They have a lot of videos exposing stuff like this. They have both the cat video and the child video, so if you're interested. But these videos are obviously really odd because, again, this group said it was all about embodying love.
Right.
And yet, Amy was able to be so abusive. Now, the cult expert that was on Dr. Phil was pretty sure Amy was a narcissist, like I mentioned earlier. My personal opinion on these two situations, is that Amy was so narcissistic that when she was dealing with someone who she couldn't manipulate with her grand divine status, like a child or a cat who wouldn't understand those things, she couldn't handle them not complying with exactly what she wanted, because she was so used to being in control of everyone around her. And that caused her to fly into a rage and start abusing them. So speaking of rage, she also has many documented violent outbursts.
Yes, she does.
On video.
Amy was known to start screaming and cussing about people who didn't believe in her. And during interviews, when people would criticize her, she'd have strange, violent shaking outbursts.
Yeah, and she would also do this if certain members were in 3D too long, like the outside world. If they spent too long out there, she would start cussing at them, calling them ego whores. Like, there's a video of this, of her just blowing up, calling them ego whores. But again, she justified these violent outbursts by basically saying that after the angels communicate with her, her body shakes. So she literally explains everything away using her divine status. And basically killing two birds with one stone by explaining her behavior and, further manipulating her followers into believing she is who she says she is.
Right. But the live stream girls, Hope and Aurora, also justified Amy's erratic behavior on Dr. Phil, saying that Amy is the world and feels everyone's collective emotion. So her outbursts are just because she's overwhelmed by the emotion of everyone on the earth.
So clearly they'll say anything they can think of to justify everything. But now let's talk about some more former members of Love Has Won and their experiences.
In 2020, a man named Alex Whitten left his wife, kids, and a 6-figure salary job to join Love Has Won. Days later, he was found wandering in the desert naked. His feet were covered in cactus needles, and he was also in the middle of a bad trip.
Yeah, so now this is our second instance of apparent psychedelic drugs. But again, according to Hope and Aurora, Amy said no to drugs. There were no drugs allowed.
Right. But they went on to classify that, saying that Amy would not consume pharmaceuticals, but alcohol is organic and a natural painkiller. So she used alcohol regularly since she couldn't take morphine.
And I'm guessing that mushrooms also fell under this organic umbrella. They were fine because they were organic. Like, my problem's not with the mushrooms. My problem is that they're often used during indoctrination into something like this to make people more easily coerced, because it gives them this fantastical experience while they're learning about these teachings, and makes them feel like they're having this big enlightenment, when in reality they're just having a trip.
When questioned about this, members said the man wasn't on a drug-related trip, but that his spiritual awakening had been so powerful that it had experiences similar to a psychedelic trip.
So, yeah, pretty much what I just said.
Another ex-member named Taylor spoke about how she had gone to join Love Has Won to become a better person for her family and children. She is fully dedicated to living full of love and being love. But she said that rather than living up to this claim, Love Has Won would feed off of people's fears and drain them. Taylor says that Amy was forcing people to leave their children and serve her. She said Amy was always looking for things that were wrong with people, forcing them to live in fear of being themselves. Taylor says flat out that Amy lied on Dr. Phil about the sleep deprivation, and that everything revolved around Amy. Amy would have people create things to sell, but all the money went to Amy. Amy wouldn't allow people to go outside or go to the outside world, referred to as the 3D, without permission. And if they stayed there too long, Amy would call them back or call them an ego whore or Lucifer. Taylor says she was so drained and tired and busy with Amy's commands that she didn't have time or energy to think about it.
Yeah, Taylor actually had to sneak into the woods with her friend Ashley to take a nap. And, when she was on Dr. Phil, Amy said, well, people take naps all the time. They're not just getting 4 hours of sleep. But they literally had to sneak away to do that.
Taylor also pointed out the high altitude in Colorado, which contributed to the easy manipulation because of the low oxygen levels.
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier. Denver is called Mile High City. That's already super high altitude. It's already, it has the effects you have when you have low oxygen. But where they were was another 2,000 feet higher. So, mile and a half high city.
Right. The mile and a half high. She also realized it was not right that she felt afraid to share her experience with Love Has Won after leaving. She meant no disrespect to the group, but wanted to share her experience because of the lovey persona they painted on Dr. Phil. It just didn't line up with her personal experience.
Yeah, so thank goodness someone like Taylor was brave enough to come forward and be truthful about this back in September 2020, even when Amy was still in full control. Because she posted this video almost right after Amy and Hope and Aurora were on Dr. Phil. Another thing I want to talk about is a pattern I've noticed in this group, just constantly contradicting themselves, whether it's their beliefs or talking about how things were within the group. So here are a few examples.
During a recent live stream, members said that the whole point of Love Has Won is to find freedom in your life and to not be put in a box that the 3D world has made for you. Instead, opting to be part of the 5D world and have the freedom to be who you are.
Yeah, so Hope and Aurora says this group's all about freedom. But other former members said that when they were there, free will was considered tantamount to sin.
What?
Yeah.
In a recent live stream, Hope and Aurora also spoke about how there were no rules within the group. That totally contradicts it.
Yeah, exactly. And yet Amy enforced that strict 4 hours of sleep a night policy, forcing members to stay up till 1 a.m., then wake up at 5 a.m., and tend to her every need.
I'd be so out. I can barely keep my eyes open past 9.
That's the problem. She does this one night. People are already drained. They don't have the energy to escape because they're out in the middle of nowhere. They're 3 hours from Colorado Springs, 5.5 hours from Denver. Like, they have nowhere to go.
Right. Amy preached that she was the embodiment of love and only showed love to her members. She told Dr. Phil that she never told anyone to surrender to her, but instead to surrender to love.
And yet, another video shows her berating a member for bringing her the wrong dinner. She had asked him to bring her chicken parm, but the man brought her meatballs.
Now that is tragic.
Yeah, but not this tragic. She went on to yell and swear angrily at him, berating him, calling him stupid, and yet she was the embodiment of love. And this is all while she constantly laid in bed, ordering her members to wait on her hand and foot, using her divine status that she'd convinced them of to coerce them into it. Now, another detail we haven't mentioned yet is Amy's claim that she's on her 534th reincarnated life.
She claims that in her past lives, she had been Marilyn Monroe, Joan of Arc, and even Jesus Christ, who she says was actually a feminine.
Yeah, and for context, she refers to different sexes as masculine and feminine. But she also claims that in a past life, her father had been Donald Trump in a past life.
That's right.
So whatever, I don't even get it. She also claims she'd just been around for 9 million years, but it could be 9 billion. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so many lofty claims that she makes to convince people that she is this divine being.
When Dr. Phil began questioning Amy about being God and remembering the crucifixion, she suddenly pivoted and said, "In truth, we are all God." But Dr. Phil recognized that this as a complete contradiction to what she had been saying all along, pointing out that wasn't what she had said before when she claimed that she was the God.
Yeah, so just another contradiction. It's so odd because based on what Hope and Aurora say in their live streams, it doesn't even seem like they're practicing the same ideologies that Amy did. They seem to be creating their own idea of what Amy was, kind of idealizing her post-mortem, and almost projecting what they wanted her to be and not what she actually was.
How sad that is.
I know.
That they're doing that.
It's really sad. You'd think a belief system like this would have some concrete pillars and beliefs, and yet, depending who you hear from, Love Has Won seems to constantly be changing.
One of Aurora's friends from before Love Has Won, Dan, spoke about how he believes that Amy Carlson has destroyed the lives of many young people.
And that seems so true, because his friend Aurora is one of the live stream girls. She's still devoutly dedicated to Amy Carlson.
According to the other past members, they were told not to sit, because if they did, it drained the life and power out of Mother God.
And yet Amy was allowed to be in bed all the time, barking orders from bed. She also told members that all the people on Earth who didn't believe in her were slowly killing her. So she was, again, killing two birds with one stone here, both justifying her impending death, even though she was a healer, and also creating more of a divide between her followers and the rest of the world, further alienating them from 3D. Now, I just want to mention here, Hope and Aurora, I don't know exactly how old they are, but they look like they're in their
20s?
mid to early 20s.
Yeah.
So it's really sad. Just looking at, this friend Dan, who knew Aurora before, seeing his friend be manipulated. And we'll talk more later about why I think this could have possibly happened based on what Hope and Aurora said in the live stream. But first, we're going to talk about yet another member. We mentioned the man who she berated for bringing her meatballs instead of chicken parm, but this man was also seen being berated in another video by the most recent father god, Jason Castillo.
Jason Castillo was a 44-year-old man with a long criminal history, including DUIs, breaking and entering, and even child neglect. After joining the group and becoming Father God, he was a disciplinarian. A video shows him yelling at the man who brought Amy the meatballs, saying, "You are effing insane, correct?" Which is such a weird thing to say to someone who brought meatballs.
I know.
Like, why are we going from 0 to a billion on the meatball thing?
Well, if you watched videos with Jason in them, that's who he is, apparently. 0 to a billion.
He also says, "How could an insane individual serve God?" And again, this is in regards to a meatball.
Well, yeah, and he's clearly insane when he's saying this. It's so...
I think I would have just started laughing if I was the guy.
Yeah, but the really sad part is he looks so dejected, so exhausted. And I think it's because of the sleep deprivation. Because this next thing we're going to talk about, he was clearly sleep deprived. I mean, you're laughing because you are not sleep deprived.
Because it's just so stupid.
Yeah, it is. And when you watch the video, it's like, are you serious?
And it's on video, which is even more insane. Like, why is this being put on YouTube?
And this next video we're about to talk about, Jason was actually recording himself.
Okay.
So Jason's recording the same guy that he was berating earlier. Now he's trying to wake this guy up.
The guy is clearly exhausted, but Jason yelled and berated him for being asleep when everyone else was awake. Again,
enforcing the strict 4 hours of sleep rule, even though they apparently have no rules.
Jason went on to tell the guy, "You're going to be a paraplegic. You're only going to have the right usage of your leg and arm."
Again.
What?
Going from 0 to a billion. It's a verbal threat on video of causing him physical harm. Basically saying he's going to break his left leg and arm. This is such a toxic place, obviously. And this is just the evidence we have now based on what they posted to YouTube. Now, the investigation will probably uncover much more that were private videos. They decided maybe we shouldn't put this on YouTube. But I don't know if they even have a filter.
It doesn't seem like they do. Jason Castillo's sister, Mindy Boyer, talked about how she wants her brother to do what makes him happy, but she wishes he'd stop recruiting innocent people into this group and helping to manipulate them.
Yeah, it's so sad to see all the people on the outside whose friends and family are in this group. Because with any cult like this, there's people on the outside who are missing their loved ones. The main reason we're discussing this group is the same reason Amy's mom and sister went on Dr. Phil. They wanted to help other people see that Amy is not this divine being. Having one person leading a group with so much power over their minds, it's so dangerous for all the reasons we just talked about, especially seeing that they're continuing these practices after Amy's death. It just shows the massive amount of control, coercive control she had over them. And the group still live streams every day. They still believe Amy was Mother God. In fact, I posted a reaction on YouTube, our first actual YouTube video. That's not just a podcast episode.
And I wanted to be on it.
Yeah, you will be next time.
I know.
I just wanted to test it out and see how it went.
Yeah.
And yeah, I basically watched part of their live stream from today and shared my thoughts on it as it went.
How long was their live stream today?
Their live stream was 1 hour 7.
It's so long.
But
I saw some for 3 hours.
I only watched the last 15 minutes of it.
Yeah.
But the scary possibility here, and why we really want to talk about it, is that they're so convicted of this. Some of them may try to follow their leader into the next realm. They already talk about 3D and 5D. We've seen this before with Heaven's Gate, with Jonestown. The cult mentality can lead people to make some really extreme decisions that lead to the loss of life. And most of the people still practicing in this group have families or friends on the outside that love and miss them and be devastated if they lost their lives. But these people have been so manipulated. They're victims of Amy's manipulation, but they may be too far gone. And that's the worry.
Amy used tactics like sleep deprivation and humiliation by turning the majority of the group against members who didn't comply with her. People who left were stigmatized as failures to the remaining members, making it harder and harder for people to leave the longer they stayed there, because the members became their family, and the fear of being ostracized by the only people they were close to anymore was enough to feel overwhelmed by the thought of leaving.
Yeah, that turning members against each other, stigmatizing the people who left, combined with the sleep deprivation.
Well, isolating them from their actual family.
Yeah, and having them in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. There was just so many things against them if they did want to leave. So now we're going to talk about one ex-member who did leave.
That ex-member, who had spent 2 months there, said that the only way she was able to leave was without notice and by leaving all of her personal items behind.
Yeah, she literally had to just run for it. Now, one thing that was mentioned while Hope and Aurora live streamed is that they had come out of a highly dysfunctional place before they joined this group, and that Amy helped them reach enlightenment. And this is what I referenced earlier when I said maybe this could contribute to how easily manipulated they were, is that maybe these people were trying to escape a bad situation at home or in their regular life, and this was how they did it. Almost how some people turn to drugs to self-medicate when they're feeling overwhelming pain in their life. Yeah. That's often how a crippling addiction starts, and sadly, It started from some other unrelated trauma, but then it turned into this addiction. So I wonder how many people have joined groups like this and this group to escape a bad situation in their life. And then once they're there, being all they know, this is just the better alternative to where they were before. Because it's either this or whatever situation they escaped.
Right. That sounds like such a wonderful cause. Love has won.
Yeah. If you find them on the internet before all this crazy stuff came out and you were like, wow, that is a message I can get behind. Like Taylor, who we talked about earlier, she still fully believes in the message that they claim they have. She's still all about living with love and being full of love, but this wasn't it for her. But anyway, to wrap up, I just want to reiterate what Dr. Phil said in his last coverage of this. He is offering resources, judgment-free help and support to anyone who wants to get out of this cult safely or any situation, you know. Mm-hmm. So please, if you are still in it or you're in a similar situation, reach out to him or somebody else that's qualified, because no matter what the people who are signing into these live streams and just slinging hate at the members that are still going say, you know, they're in the wrong too. Anyone who's signing into the live stream to insult these people is also in the wrong.
Right. Because these not going to do any good.
No. And these people are victims of this cult manipulation. It's not, you know, there's some really complex psychology that goes into how they ended up here, and going there calling them stupid, that's not going to help them at all. So it's important they have a judgment-free situation. So if you're hearing this and you're in a situation like this, just please reach out to someone who's qualified that won't judge you for this situation. Whew. What do you think, Rosie?
I thought this was fascinating. When I watched it on Dr. Phil, I was fascinated. And then all of a sudden we were listening to a podcast about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I already know about this.
Yeah, it's weird because Dr. Phil talked about it in September of 2020.
Yeah.
Less than a year ago. And then when she was found dead, it all blew up. So
yeah, it's just wild.
Yeah. But thank you for listening. Before we go, I want to remind you that I was a guest on that new fascinating podcast, Coloring Outside the Mind. They're our friends and just getting started on podcasting, so we'd really appreciate if you went over, gave them a chance. Mm-hmm. We'll put the link in the show notes. Joe's production quality is much better than ours. Like he really sounds professional. He organizes his topics in a very well-told way. Like, you know, our show is so casual and his is very tight. So that's just a little foreshadowing. Anyway, Rosie, do you want to read this review before we go?
Yeah, it says, been listening for a while. I've been meaning to write a review for so long, but since I primarily use Spotify, I had not gotten around to do it. I have been listening to VOV since their episode on Jeffrey Epstein, when I randomly discovered them one day while I was flying. I have been an avid listener since then, and I love both Ryan and Rosie.
Aww.
It is so cool to see how you guys have progressed so much from where you started, which I believe is the mark of a truly great podcast. You guys truly care about victims and are so sensitive and understanding. This podcast is so real. I love the rawness, and it contrasts the over-scriptedness of many popular podcasts today. I love Voice of the Victim, and I will certainly be a lifelong listener. Aw. Say hi to the cats for me.
Thank you so much. And who's that from?
Bria Slaw in the US of A.
Thank you so much. It's funny they mentioned Epstein because I was just thinking today and other times in the past how we did way too many episodes on Epstein. Like,
well, yeah, but how could we not? Like, it was such a long story.
True. Well, we didn't even scratch the surface. That's the crazy part.
Yeah.
But also, before we go, I want to give some love to our listeners over on YouTube. Brittany Parker left some really, really nice comments over there. And also Scottish Lass Mel. Thank you both for your support on YouTube. YouTube's a weird place because, they promote your videos to random people who've never heard of you before. So most of the comments we get over there are like, you suck. But but we do have a few regular listeners over there that are really kind. So if you are one of them, reach out to us, let us know, because we appreciate you just as much as everyone else. Thanks again to our patrons. You guys are amazing. If you would like to support the show, the Patreon link's always in the show notes. We have a couple new premium Patreon episodes coming out soon.
Yes, we do.
Where we're going to discuss the Netflix documentaries, both the one on Killdozer, which we're going to do kind of a descriptive episode on because we were in Granby, Colorado, where it happened. We didn't even know.
Yeah, it just kind of happened that way.
We accidentally stumbled upon the place and we're like, oh my gosh, that happened here? And so I bought the book that they were selling at the coffee shop there. So we'll be covering that over on Patreon. And we also will be discussing the documentary from Netflix about the Cecil Hotel. If you don't know, that's where Elisa Lam went missing and then was later discovered. That's where the Night Stalker, what the heck was his name? Who cares?
Richard Ramirez?
Yeah, that guy. He stayed while he was at the end of his spree.
It's just a creepy place.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that Skid Row was real. I know that sounds super naive. But
Yeah.
I just thought that was where people that were gonna die in prison, that's what they called it.
Oh, you mean death row?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we all have no one knows everything. That's what I was trying to say. There was one more thing I was going to mention. Oh yeah, the Black Dahlia also.
Oh, that's right.
Was said to be seen at that hotel before she died. So a lot of bad stuff has surrounded that place. And watching that documentary, you learn some crazy stuff. So we'll be talking about that in more detail over on Patreon soon, just to give you a heads up. And that's where we're going to wrap it up. Rosie, you have anything else to say before we go?
Well, I've been sneaking the Love Has Won cat abuse video.
Oh, no.
And you're right, it is pretty terrible. It's gross.
Well,
it's just so weird to me that she's so okay with having this stuff out on the internet. Or she was okay with it.
I know. Well, I don't know if it's still up on her channel.
No, I found it on a different one.
Yeah, this was a different channel. But still, the fact that she did that on a live stream at all.
She's just as a terrifying human being.
And again, if you watch it with sound, it's even more disturbing, and it's very obvious that she's wasted.
Will not be watching it with sound.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. All right. Well, thank you again for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.